Hello everyone, this is Greg Day speaking. I'm going to talk to you today about monitoring training load using a low-tech version of the programs that are available. There are some medium-tech smartphone apps available. There's some high-tech apps such as Training Peak, high-tech software. Smarter Base also is very high-tech. This is just a low-tech version using Excel. Created a database that allows me to record the ratings of perceived exertion for any one training session in triathlon, so just the ride or just the swim or just the run, and then multiply that by the amount of time spent on the ride or the distance ridden on the ride, and correspondingly for swim and the run. And as a result, the RPE multiplied by either the duration or the distance travelled produces a sessional load which is mapped every day, and it also gives us a weekly load which relates to the strain, and we see how the variation in training occurs over the period of a complete training program leading up to one event, which also allows us to record monotony, which tells us whether the training has varied enough. And we also get to see acute training load, which is a moving average of 7 days of session loads, and a chronic training load, which is a moving average of 28 days of sessional load. We could also make that a 42-day load. That just requires changing the formula. And the reason that we do this is because we want to see whether an athlete's fitness is rising, and that is captured by the metric chronic training load, and we want to see how their training in the previous 7 days relates to their fitness. So if they've trained very, very, very hard in the last 7 days, but their previous 1 month has been very low, then we would say that that's a very high stress on the athlete, because they didn't bring a great deal of fitness in the previous month into the previous week. And when the training volume and the training load and the training intensity goes up in the previous 7 days relative to the previous month, there's a high chance that the athlete will get sick or injured. So we can monitor that, and we use some cut-off thresholds of 80% and 150%. Those are numbers that relate to training stress balance. And training stress balance is a metric that is a ratio of the acute training load and the chronic training load. So that's a bit of background explanation, and for those of you who understand that, I will keep continuing. For those who don't understand that, perhaps you can get in touch with me and I can forward you some references around about that. So you can see that I have split the RPE and duration for the riding program, for the swim program, and for the run program for dates carrying over 18 weeks. Now I've set the RPEs based on estimates of the training load that has been provided by Training Newbies, which is here. Training Newbies provided an 18-week program for a triathlon, a half Ironman triathlon, that incorporates 3 months of base work and then 6 weeks of speed and quality work, ending into a race day there with a lot of explanation further down the page about how to moderate the sessions, what they should feel like, what sort of pace they should be like. So I can put the link in my blog there. So I took that program there, and I took the meterage for the swim and the distance for the bike, and also the time for the run, and I populated that into numerical format into the spreadsheet. And what that does is completes all of the data to produce a chart, a predictive chart for the next 18 weeks. I estimated the speed for the running and the swimming and the riding based on somebody who was progressing towards a ride in a half Ironman distance of around about 2 hours 26, which would have placed you 100th in the Challenge Melbourne half Ironman in 2015. From the swim leg, I populated the speed of the swim to be approximately that of someone who was to finish 100th in the Challenge Melbourne half Ironman swim of, so that's 1.9 kilometres in, I think we've estimated the time as being 30 minutes. And the half Ironman to be run in 91 minutes. So each of those times and distances there would have made you 100th in the Challenge Melbourne half Ironman this year in Australia. So by populating those numbers, we have a ride training load chart, which looks like so. So we see first macro cycle of 1 month, the second one there goes up a little bit more, the third one goes up again more. Then we have 6 weeks of speed and quality tapering down to race day there. I have produced 2 graphs, one that creates a sessional loads, which is the black line, by time, and one that populates it by distance. As it turns out, the progress looks the same, and it turns out the same there. So I've produced those charts for riding and for swimming by meterage and by time, and also by running, and then I've accumulated all of the data together so that we can see that there is a sessional load for every single day except one day of the week, which is a rest day in the first couple of weeks, and then it starts to pick up and there are no rest days throughout the whole time. So the training load of all events gives us a training stress balance which is very, very high in the first 4 weeks. We've previously discussed why that is the case, and that is because it takes 28 days of data for the training stress balance to wash out to a true value. And once we see the true value, we see that in the early stages, the program is designed to push the person to a high training stress balance to generate fitness gains with appropriate recoveries later in the week. And then as the fitness is gained in that second macro cycle, we don't see the training stress balance hit the lofty heights of 150% for the rest of the program. It sits between 100 and say 135% until the speed and quality session, where it starts to actually drop off, and that would indicate that the overall training stress is decreasing, but we still see that the chronic fitness, which is the blue line, is increasing. It does drop off a little bit just at the end, but the athlete has gained a significant fitness over those 18 weeks. The reason that I did split up the training loads between the 3 events is because if we just had all of the sessional loads for the triathlon training, we would have this chart, and that would tell us that the athlete has gained fitness, is fresh by the end of the session, and has had a macro cycle which is quite inviting, and accounting for monotony and strain, we can see that the monotony is quite good, it's quite low, so that means it's a lot of variability, and the strain has definitely gone up in that third macro cycle there, which is reflected in the significant jump between that second macro cycle there and that one there. So that would be an occasion where the person needed to be careful. However, the reason, going back to my original statement, the reason I split it up into 3 was because an athlete who shared this profile could be quite confident about their ability to handle the rigours of stress on race day here. However, if this chart was purely made up of a high volume and good training in the ride and the swim, and for some reason the athlete missed some of the training in running because of soreness or work commitments or something, we might not capture the fact that the training load for the athlete as a runner was not good enough, and we might see that their run leg on the triathlon half Ironman might suffer. And that might not be captured if we just looked at all of the training together. So we look at it through all of the events, and we like to make sure that the running program that's been designed also follows a profile that brings the athlete's fitness up and that has them prepared for race day. Similarly with the swim and similarly with the ride. So if we did look at some of these examples here, the ride through the second macro cycle onwards stimulates the athlete quite well with plenty of recovery, and that's because there's only 3 rides a week, and then later it picks up to a 4th ride. In the swim, we see the training stress balance definitely pushes through that third macro cycle and second, and then it doesn't seem to push as much in the speed and quality work, and actually drops off in the final week to under 80%, which would indicate that the athlete has lost some fitness in the final week. So there could be room for adjusting the RPE and the duration, or to make sure that that doesn't drop below 80%. From the run point of view, we see that there's a nice mix of stress and recovery, and again we see that little drop in fitness in the final week, and that a run to finish the triathlon rate is very hard, definitely pushes the person right up towards their limit. There is a tab down here which is behind the scenes, and that is just where all the formulas are placed to give me the charts that are based on the front end of entering data. So an athlete that used a spreadsheet like this would only have to enter the RPE and the duration for each event and just track that every single day and watch what happens to their training over the course of the session. So they could populate an estimated plan for the entire 18 weeks, and then they could track the estimated plan versus the actual training load, and you can see where training needs to be adjusted throughout the plan to increase the RPE or increase the intensity, or to increase the training time, or in fact to decrease either of those, to make sure that you're getting a training effect that produces an increase in fitness and a tapering without stressing the person to a point that they are likely to suffer illness or injury. So I hope that's useful for you. I'll put the links into Training Newbie, and let me know your thoughts.